In this lesson, we're going to be taking a look at Puppet Producer's interface and general workflow. Puppet Producer works by allowing you to quickly rig up your characters for use in CrazyTalk Animator. You can use Puppet Producer in any version of Flash as far back as Flash CS3, as well as Animate, CC, any of the latest versions. In order to use it, you have to make sure that you're using an ActionScript 3 document. You cannot be using an HTML5 document, otherwise it will not work. To access it, if you are using Flash CS3 and above, go to the Window menu and select Other Panels, Puppet Producer. And here is the panel. If you are using Adobe Animate CC and above, then you will go to the Window menu, Extensions, Puppet Producer. And this is our panel here. The easiest way to work with Puppet Producer is to build your character, and once you're ready to rig your character up, simply select the item you wish to rig up and click the appropriate function inside of Puppet Producer. In this case, we're looking at the very first angle. This is the front angle of my character, so I'm looking at the front angle of my character in the Puppet Producer panel. If you are configuring a different angle, then use these arrows to toggle the angle that you're looking to configure. After you have drawn your character, ideally you will have separated each body sprite into the necessary sprites, so that at this point you can just select the appropriate sprite and then click the matching function. In this case, it's my right character's right upper arm, so I'm going to click on the appropriate matching button here. Notice that once I do that, my upper arm has been granted an instance name of right arm 0, and it has been given a pivot. This is the pivot that is going to be used to indicate where the bone will be located in your CrazyTalk Animator character. I'm going to go ahead and configure the rest of the sprites real quick. Using this method, I'm not really thinking about the technical aspects of my character. I'm simply configuring based on the requirements of CrazyTalk. Here's my hip, my upper thigh, my other upper thigh. Okay, at this point I did mess up. I accidentally clicked the foot sprite on the panel while having the left shin selected. This is very easily fixed. I'm going to select the pivots that were created, and I'm going to select the actual sprite and use the eraser function. This will clean it out. Notice that as I've done different things, I'm getting some feedback as to what has been done, so you can kind of see what you've done, a little bit of a history of the different things that you've done. So now that I've erased the configuration from this sprite, I can go ahead and try again. Now we're going to do the other foot and the other foot. Here I have selected my mouth sprite. Next we'll do the back hair, the ear, the other ear, one of the eyes, the other eye, the nose, and the front hair. So at this point I have pretty much configured every single main sprite of this character. There are a few sprites that require additional configuration. Actually, hang on, I have failed to do the eyebrow sprites. Let me go ahead and take care of those real quick. Now I have a completed character here. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go inside of the sprites that require nested items. So in this case, I'm going to go into this character's right eyebrow. And when we talk about left and right, we're usually referring to the character's left and right, not our left and right. So in terms of development, this character's right eyebrow is this one, and his left eyebrow is this one. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and double click inside of this eyebrow here. That's going to take me into edit in place mode. And notice that inside of this eyebrow, I have a series of frames that are already nested. I have exactly 18 different eyebrow sprites. And each one of these has already been configured, has already been converted into a symbol. And ideally, what you want to use is a movie clip symbol, because those are the type of symbols that are able to be named using the body part names that you require. Okay, so Puppet Producer has a series of buttons on the right hand side here. This is our eyebrow section, our eyes section, nose, mouth, and hands section. So these are the items that do require additional nested sprites. In this case, let's take a look at the eyebrows. Notice that there are 8 frames, and each frame has a button. So if I want to configure the eyebrow that belongs on frame 1, which is our normal sprite, I just select it, click normal, and notice that it has been granted the normal instance name. If I go to frame number 2, that's my shrink eyebrow. Okay, so I'm going to select it and click the shrink button. Now let's say we're dealing with frame number 12. That's this one here. Frame number 12 is the angry eyebrow. So with the eyebrow selected, we're going to click on that button, and configuring it is as easy as clicking on a button. In certain workflows, you may choose to simply animate or draw the entire series of eyebrows rather than doing one at a time. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to break everything apart. So here we can see that not only is the shape just a basic shape, but it's not a symbol. So it needs to be converted into a symbol, and it needs to be configured to work with CrazyTalk. So in this case, let's assume that I'm going through each frame and individually just drawing out the frames that belong, or the sprites that belong in each frame. After I'm done drawing, I don't have to go and individually configure each one independently. What I can do is I can use the auto config button. That's this little purple button right here with a little gear around it. When I click on that, it'll iterate through every single frame. It'll convert it, whatever it finds in that frame, into a movie clip symbol, and it will give it the appropriate configuration. It is important that this is done, because if CrazyTalk does not detect the sprite or the sprite name, it will not import it. Sometimes you can get away with simply duplicating a sprite. So here's my right eyebrow just duplicated. And what I can do is I can go to modify, transform, horizontal, flip horizontal, and I can easily use that to be my left eyebrow. You can do that with any sprite that can be basically mirrored, so that you can save yourself a little bit of work. So you don't have to actually go and create all these sprites here, when you can just create it one time, and anything you do to this side will be automatically applied to that side. So let's take a look at the eyes. The eyes uses 13 different primary sprites that are nested inside of that one eye symbol. So This is our, let's go into the eye mode here. The normal eye. On frame number 5, we have the stretch eye edges sprite. On frame number 10, we have the angry sprite. And on frame number 13, we have the angry race cheeks sprite. The eyes are kind of special. They have 2 different levels of nesting. The first level is the actual sprite itself, just like the eyebrow. But if we go in one level deeper by double clicking on that, we can see that there, this one eye sprite is composed of 3 different items. The layer at the bottom is called the image layer. This contains the overall look and feel of the eye shape itself. The middle layer contains your iris. That's this sprite right here. The top layer contains the mask layer, and that's basically a duplicate of this white area here. It's been placed above everything, and it's used to mask out the area where the eyeball will move around. We will learn more about creating eyes and configuring them in a later lesson, but in this case, just know that there are multiple levels of nesting when it comes to the eyes. And the same way that the other sprites are modified, for example, this is my image sprite here. If I selected, click the image base or the eye base button, it'll configure it and it'll give it the appropriate name. And you do that with every sprite. Let's go out one level. Let's go out another level. Let's take a look at the nose. The nose uses 8 sprites. At frame 1, we have the normal nose. Frame 5 has the raised right nose flank. That's that right there. And let's skip to another frame at random. Here's number 8. That's the raised left shrink nose flank sprite. And you configure this exactly the same way that we do the eyebrows. So you can go ahead and just draw your noses one at a time until you have every single frame, and then use the auto config, or you do one at a time by drawing the items that you need and then clicking the buttons one at a time. The mouth sprites are a little bit challenging. There's 30 mouth sprites in total. So this is going to take you a little while to draw everything. So let's take a look at a few random selections. I'm going to switch over into our panel here to our mouth area. And let's take a look at number 6, the stretch lip edge sprite. So let's look at number 6. That's that one there. Let's take a look at number 10. That would be the raised chin sprite. Let's take a look at number 20. That would be the move jaw to the left sprite. Let's try frame 25, which contains the E expression. So when your character is talking, it'll use these sprites here. So that's the normal, ah, o, e, oo, woo, f, or v, l and d, or the s, d type sound. Okay, so those are the phonemes that go at the end over here. So let's see, number 30 would be the s sound. The number 28 one is the f sound. So this is what your character would look like when he's doing f. And configuring them is exactly the same as the eyebrows. So you can go through it all 30 frames and just kind of reference what you're supposed to draw in each frame. And once you are done, you can use the auto config button, and it'll basically go through every frame and it'll convert anything that it finds in each frame into the mouth shape, and it'll give it the appropriate instance name. All right, so that does that. The other one that the other sprites that require nested sprites are the hand sprites. Hands will generally have 11 sprites in all. So here, let's take a look at the front arm, the relaxed one, that's number 1. The OK gesture, that's at frame 4, right there. Open hand in frame 9. That's that one there. And let's take a look at the first, or the 1. Okay, the 1. Oops, I don't want to click that. That is at frame 5. So there it goes, I'm number 1, or he can be pointing at something. The fist is at frame 6. And there you have it, basically. You can draw your frames one at a time until you have all 11. And once you're done, simply click the auto config button. That'll do everything at once for you, and you could just forget about it. So as you can see, working with Puppet Producer takes away the whole technical aspect of it. All you have to do is click a couple buttons, and the technical aspects of rigging and configuring are pretty much taken care of for you. There's really not too many shortcuts for speeding up your drawing and artwork. I mean, that's all creative stuff, so that's going to take you as long as it takes you, but rigging up your character shouldn't be a pain. And therefore, using Puppet Producer will allow you to just take that technical aspect completely out of the equation. Sometimes you may require to adjust a pivot point. So in this case, let's take a look at this, this torso. When I configured this torso, it put my pivot point for that torso way up here. Obviously, I don't want that. I want that torso to rotate somewhere along this section here, so that when he's inside of CrazyTalk, that torso will rotate along this pivot. So we wanted to rotate something like this inside of CrazyTalk. So it's important that you adjust your pivots based on where you want that bone to be. So if we wanted this arm to have the pivot here instead of here, then we would simply move the pivot points down a bit. Okay, and that would cause the pivots to be way down there rather than at the shoulder. So be creative as how you configure your characters. I mean, there's really unlimited ways for you to build characters, and it's all about your personal creative choices. So once we have let's take a look at some of the other features of Puppet Producer. If I have navigated to one of the nested items and want to get back to my main puppet area, I can click this button here. This button will allow me to go back to the main area where I can continue to configure other angles of my character. The eraser button, as you saw earlier, is used whenever you make a mistake. You can, instead of going in here selecting the sprite and manually removing that instance name, then maybe getting rid of that mouth pivot so that you can start again, what you can do is you can just simply select everything and press that eraser button, and everything that has been selected will have its configuration removed. Now, this does not remove the pivots, but if you notice, here's our neck, which was originally selected. It doesn't have an instance name. Here's our nose. The nose pivot is not configured because it's been erased, so we'll go ahead and get rid of that. There's one of the ear pivots, one of the eye pivots. If we select the actual sprites, we can see that the configuration has been removed. So I can easily wipe out all these configurations so that I can reconfigure them. It's important that if you make a mistake and you need to reconfigure something, that you just kind of blank everything out so that you can easily be able to reconfigure it. And there we have it. The mirroring functions are a little bit of a special time saver. In some cases, you will want to save time by automatically mirroring an entire angle so that you can continue working. So what we do, for example, we're going to mirror this as our front angle. We took our time, we developed our character's front angle, and I'm going to use the mirror function to create a 180-degree angle automatically. That way I don't have to build it from scratch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this mirror function. I'm going to go front to back, and I'm going to click the OK button. We'll give it a few seconds to do its thing. And once it's complete, you'll notice that there is a copy of this front angle next to the angle itself. So it is also grouped. So one of the things that we're going to do is, if we're going to modify this angle, we can just break it apart by selecting it and pressing Control B one time. This breaks it up into the individual sprites. So now I can start working with this back angle. So obviously it's not going to do everything for you. There's a little bit of manipulation that you're going to do. In this case, I'm going to send this jaw to the back by pressing Control down, as far down as it'll go. I can send the nose, the eyes, the eyebrows, using the same thing, Control down a bunch of times just to hide it behind everything. That allows everything to be kind of invisible. I'm not deleting anything. Try not to delete sprites, because then you might run into issues later on in CrazyTalk. It might be asking for a sprite. It's better to have it and not be able to see it than it is to be dealing with you know, sprite errors, trying to find where it is that you place a specific sprite. Or in the future, you may want to modify a character and you want that sprite to be there. I'm going to take this back here, and I can press Control up a couple times and bring it to the back, to the front. It doesn't matter if it covers up the sprites. I like to have my sprites visible so I can see where everything is. And already it's looking like the back of this character. Now I don't have to use Control up and down, but it is easier. I can also right click on a sprite and use the arrange option. Bring to front, bring forward, send backwards, send to back, and so on. So I'm going to send it completely to the back. There we go. But I didn't really want it to be behind that jaw. I want it to be in front of that jaw. So I'm just going to use my keyboard shortcuts to get it just right. Control up a couple times. And then we're going to put this torso above the neck, and everything else looks okay to me. Maybe send these feet to the back. So that takes care of the layering for this angle. Now if you notice in the properties panel, it will show you the properties of anything that's selected on the stage. So I'm going to select this torso. It tells you that it's the upper torso 180-degree angle. And this is the neck. Now the neck has not been configured because earlier you saw how I accidentally, or actually on purpose, erased that instance name. So what I'm going to do is, in this case, I'm going to get rid of this pivot since it's not properly configured. And here's my neck. I'm going to manually configure that one, front. And this is going to be my back, so I'm going to switch over here. And some of these things I actually did on purpose so you can kind of see how to navigate and how to just kind of, you know, how to negotiate certain things that you're going to run into, sometimes by accident, sometimes on purpose. So here it is, that one sprite. I'm going to go and select my neck. So there's my neck, 180. There's my pivot for that neck, 180. And everything else, here is the torso, upper torso 0, and this is my upper torso 180. Now obviously this torso does not look like the back of this character, so we're going to have to create a new sprite for this angle. And the best way to do it is to clone the angle, okay? Because basically this is the same sprite as this one, and what we want to do at this point is we want to clone it so that it'll be a different sprite. I'm going to right click, select duplicate symbol, and whatever the symbol name is, it's going to put it here, and it's going to add the word copy. So we're going to just change a little bit the name. We're going to select, call it back. Now it's a completely different sprite. The reason you want to clone these is that this upper arm, for example, is the same as this upper arm right here. So any modification that I do to this arm will automatically be applied to these other sprites. We don't want that in this case. Okay, we want to be able to modify that one sprite without affecting the original one. So now that we've done that, I can go in here, maybe get rid of the section that contained those lines and add a new section here just to kind of make it look like it's the back of a character. And we'll just draw something. We'll just draw something like this. Okay, so now we can kind of at least suggest that this is the back of the character. And it's an independent sprite, so it did not affect our front sprite. We'll probably also need to do that with the hip area. Notice that if I were to go in here and start modifying this hip, it'll be modifying our front hip. We don't want that. We want to make that an independent sprite. So we're going to go outside. We're going to right click that sprite, and we're going to duplicate it. Call it back or call it 180, that's fine. And we'll do whatever modifications we need to do at this point to make that happen. Okay, so now that we've done that, we have the back of the sprite and the front of the sprite. Okay, so with that in mind, I mean, you can pretty much make your own judgment calls on what it is that needs to be mirrored so that you can, you know, complete your conversion into the back angle. So using these techniques, you can see that I already saved myself a lot of time by not having to do all the work of redrawing this character, reconfiguring it. I'm really only just cloning a few sprites at this point. Here's one of the feet, and I'm going to go inside of, well, actually I'm going to clone it first. I'm going to duplicate it. Back foot. So now, again, if we were to go in here and modify that sprite, every instance of that sprite is going to get modified. We don't want that. That's why it's important to clone everything that you're going to be turning into a unique sprite. So in this case, I have created that unique sprite here. It's a clone. I'm going to go zoom in a little bit. And I'm just going to draw a new foot. And I'm not going to do anything fancy. This is just for demonstration purposes. So this would be the back of your foot. It would look something like this. And let's see, maybe get rid of the previous layers. But now I have created a new unique sprite that represents the back of that foot. Now, I could go in there and do the same thing for this one, but you know, we want to be able to be efficient at how we do things. So what we're going to do next is we're going to select this one, and we're going to use the swap option in Flash. So right click, select swap symbol, and we're going to look for the sprite that we created. Probably should have paid attention to what I named it. I named it back foot. So I'm going to select this sprite, choose swap symbol, look for the back foot symbol, click OK, and now it's automatically replaced with a copy of this symbol. So if I do later on decide that I want to go in here and clean that up or make a different type of foot, I can do that. Very easily. And any modification that I do to this sprite will have taken place on this side. Okay. If you want to adjust the layering, you can use Control Up, Control Down on whatever symbol you have selected. So the same thing applies maybe to the hands. In this particular case, maybe we want to be able to draw hands that represent the back side of this character. We would basically select one of these, duplicate it, and of course all the configurations still remain the same. The inside is already pre-configured. If it's not, then you'll need to configure it, and you'll probably want to do a swap on the other hand so that this instance of the symbol is the same as this one, and both of these are completely different from the ones being used here. So at this point, I have essentially created two angles, and it really didn't take that long to do. Any additional creative stuff, it's really on you. You just got to go in here and edit the sprites as needed. So in many cases, you might want to keep the same sprites across all the different angles, unless there are certain things that appear in the back of the character that are supposed to be different. So maybe this guy here has a tattoo on his left arm. Okay. And we don't necessarily want it to be on every single arm. So what we would do is we would make the one sprite that's supposed to be unique into its own independent sprite. So let's go ahead and go backwards a little bit. We're going to turn this sprite into the one that has that one independent item. Duplicate. So now we can edit it. Okay, and only that one sprite has that particular change. Now of course this is my character's left arm, so I want it to be here on this side too, on his left side. So we're going to take that sprite and we're going to swap it out. So you'll make your own creative judgments as to how you do this, okay? But that's essentially how you work with that. All right, so using those techniques, you're going to go through your entire creation process, building up your character in all the different angles that you need. You don't need all the angles. In some cases, you may simply just want a single angle character. But whenever you are ready to move on to CrazyTalk Animator, simply export your movie as a Flash movie. And you'll go to CrazyTalk Animator. You'll drop any one of your characters here. A G2 character with all of his sprites is the preferred option because you don't want to run into any sprite issues. Go into composer mode. And in composer mode, you're going to see this SWF import button. You're going to look for your Flash movie and import it. This is going to grab all of your different sprites, your layering, all that stuff, and bring everything in one go. And now that your character has been assembled inside of CrazyTalk Animator, you can perform additional stuff like, you know, configuring the different layering of the different body parts in case some stuff doesn't look quite right. You can adjust the joint masks regions to just kind of make it blend better as it moves. And you can do additional things like configure the render style grouping if you want to be able to dynamically change that character's colors. Okay, so that's pretty much how you use Puppet Producer for building your own custom characters for CrazyTalk Animator. Let's take a look at one more function. Now, the other option that you'll see directly on the Puppet Producer panel is this one here. This is an export feature. Sometimes you may be creating things that are not necessarily to be rigged as a whole. Sometimes you're creating a prop. So whenever that is the case, let's say I am simply making a prop for you know, a hand that's holding a cell phone. So we're gonna just kind of draw a finger here. And this is not a common sprite, so we just want it to be used for a one-time usage type of situation. I'm not going to be too detailed about how I'm doing it. I'm not focusing too much on artwork. I mean, you can pretty much take your own time as to how you're going to do your own artwork. But let's say I've created a new sprite or a new prop, a plant, a lamp, it doesn't matter. I turn that into a symbol. Go to modify, convert to symbol, or press the F8 function key on your keyboard. Phone grab. And what we want to do is we'll select this symbol here and we'll press that button. We have different options. The one that I like using is just export selected frames, because this allows me to just create a series of different props across different frames and just independently, you know, grab everything out of there as an independent movie. So I'm gonna do that frames option right now. And I am going to create a new folder. Call it Sprites. And I'll select the folder. And every selected frame is basically exported as a Flash movie. Now, this Flash movie is named Untitled2_Layer1 Frame 1, basically. It's basically taken on the properties of the frames itself. And I'm going to launch CrazyTalk real quick. Okay, so basically importing a prop is just a matter of taking your SWF file. I mean, you can rename this if you want before bringing them. We'll call it phone grab maybe. And just drag and drop it into the stage. And there is our prop. You can use this, let's say if this was a lamp that you're putting onto your stage. So if you're building a scene, for your character, you can build like your tables, your chairs or whatever by simply drawing your items and dropping them into your stage this way. In this case, this is going to be kind of like a temporary body part for a character. So what I'm going to do here is I'll take any one of these characters. Let's see here. G2, I'll just use this one. There's different ways of working with this. It's kind of outside of the scope of what this lesson is supposed to be, but I just want to give you a quick idea. So let's say that this was a new arm or new hand sprite that you want to kind of be able to use that you don't have in your character's hand gesture library. We're just going to link it to the hand here, and maybe we'll take the original hand. Let's see, try to select this. Go to sprite. We'll kind of turn that invisible for now. We'll just move this here. So that's one quick and easy way to have, a new hand sprite that wasn't available before on your character. There's a quick and easy way to animate things, create sprites for your characters that are not part of the initial stuff. So another way, if you want to implement the sprite as a permanent part of your character, you can always go into composer mode, go into the sprite editor, select the hand that you wish to use, and of course, once you're in the sprite editor, you can drag and drop your sprite and just add it to that character's sprite library. Do some quick adjustments. And of course, if I would have drawn this the other way around, it probably would look a little bit better, but you get the idea. So now our character has more than one sprite. So here's the original sprites, and at any point I can go in there and switch to that particular sprite. So it's very easy, and that's one of the reasons why I included this export function. So not only does it help you easily create new body sprites for your characters that you can incorporate into the characters, but it's also a great way for you to just use Flash as your art program, as you're drawing. Let's say, hey, I'm creating a scene and I need a tree. So I'll just go into Flash, draw my tree, actually I'm gonna do this as a two-part prop so that you can get a better idea of the multiple ways of getting things done. So just something very basic. Okay, so I've created a tree and a branch. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this branch here, this tree here, and I am going to get rid of that outline real quick. I'm going to turn that into its own symbol, F8, tree. We'll call this one branch. Okay, so this time we're going to use a different export method. Okay, I have two different symbols on my stage. I'm going to select the first one, the tree. I'm going to select selected symbol. Actually, I'm going to do both of them at the same time. Selected symbols. And the flip horizontal. Flip horizontal, this is for other things, like sometimes you'll want to export a body sprite that was already mirrored. So you want to compensate for that flipping, so that way if you export something that was to the left, it doesn't screw it up for you. It doesn't turn it to the right. It keeps it the way it's supposed to be. Let's go ahead and do selected symbols. Click OK. We'll select a folder where this thing is going to be exported. I'm going to go to the Sprites folder that we created earlier. And we'll take a look at that folder. So here it is. And this one actually uses the symbol name. So here we can tell that this one's the branch and this one's the tree. If we open up the movie into whatever local player you may have, you can preview that. All right, I'm just going to go ahead and simplify the name here real quick before I actually start working with it. And looks like I may have accidentally misspelled that also. So we'll just fix that real quick. And I still misspelled it. Let's do that. So now we have a branch and a tree. We'll go to CrazyTalk. So Puppet Producer itself goes a little bit beyond just the ability to create characters. You can also use it as a bridge between Flash and CrazyTalk to create additional assets. So when actually working with CrazyTalk, we can build our scenes. We can use art. We can use Flash as our art program to quickly create items that we're going to use to build our scene. So here's our tree, and here's our branch for our tree. And the reason I created it as two different sprites is that, for one, I can take advantage of some of the 3D functions by layering stuff at different depths. So depending on how I'm doing my scene, I can easily, just kind of layer it to create different 3D layering effects with that. You don't have to do that, but as you move your camera left and right, you get a little bit of parallax between those items too. So I can take this branch, link it to the tree. So now when I move that tree, the branch also moves with it. I can duplicate a prop, flip it around, and make a more complex tree just with a few basic items. So alternately, you can also create more permanent sprites or more permanent props. The way we do that is we start with by dragging and dropping your sprites into the stage. Then we're going to go into our scene manager here, our content manager. We'll switch to custom prop, and we'll just use this add, or we can create a new folder. So let's say we'll create a new folder called shrubbery or something. So let's see if we can find an empty spot here. We got to switch to custom, and in here we're going to create a new folder. We're going to call it trees, and here we're going to basically take our main tree. We're going to call this one trunk. We're going to add it. And here we have a branch. So these two items have been converted into permanent props that I can use later on. What I can do now is I can take my main sprite here, go into composer mode for it, and find our custom stuff here. Here's our trees folder. We're going to bring in a branch. I'm going to drop it there. We'll take the pivot and move it there. Grab another branch. Take the pivot and move it there. And now I can go into the main composer mode, and this one is treated as its own independent sprite. So go to our content manager, props, trees. We'll save that as its own sprite. And anytime that I want to use any of these props, I can always just drag and drop them onto my stage and start building my scene. So with just a few props, you can build an entire scene. Okay, let's say we want like a little background there. We're gonna go back to Flash. Let's draw some hills. Okay, and we don't have to convert everything into a sprite or a symbol. We can simply leave it as is and use the export function, use the selected frame. That way anything on that frame is exported, not just the selected symbol. Don't need to create a name. It'll create a name for us based on whatever it exported. So here it is right there. We'll just go ahead and rename it Hill. We'll drop it onto our stage. We'll place it there. And we'll move it in 3D space backwards a bit. We'll adjust the Z depth of some of these trees. So this is actually the most efficient way to work with CrazyTalk because you don't have any drawing tools in CrazyTalk Animator. So you can't just go, oh, okay, I'm gonna get the pencil tool or a brush and start drawing what you need. But Flash is one of the most powerful vector drawing tools out there that you can use to as your art program. So, and Puppet Producer basically acts as a bridge between the two programs. So we're going to do one more sprite here just so you can get a better idea of how to work with this. So here's a sort of a circle with eyes and a smiley face. And I'm going to take that, maybe fill it in with this. And I'll just kind of make some fancy little rays going around it. And I'm just using basic artwork. I mean, the purpose of this is not to teach you how to draw. It's just to kind of teach you how to use Puppet Producer and how to get the best out of it. So this one is going to be its own symbol. I'm going to turn that into a movie clip maybe. Actually, let's make that, let's make that into a graphic symbol. We call it rays. And we're going to go in there. I'm going to nest that into something else. It doesn't matter what the name is. Just so that we can animate it. Insert keyframe. Create classic tween. And we're going to have this rotate counterclockwise one time. Or clockwise should be fine. So it's doing this number, okay? It's just a very basic animation. And just to avoid any bugs, I'm just going to convert that into a frame-by-frame animation. You don't normally have to do this on anything, but in some cases it does. CrazyTalk doesn't know how to interpret tweens, so it's better just to have everything as frame-by-frame animations. In many cases, it will recognize basic tweens, though. So this one, I'm going to convert that like that. And I don't know, maybe maybe I'll animate the colors. And I want to do some heavy animation on this because I want you guys to get an idea of what's going on here. Keyframe. So this one, I'm going to animate the brightness property maybe. So it does this. No, I don't like that. Let's do some tint. Let's change it to like, okay. So then we're going to just kind of do a classic tween, and we have a little animation that kind of does this, like a little flashy type of thing. I'm gonna go ahead and convert that to a frame by frame animation. And I'm just gonna make it 10 frames long maybe. I'm gonna convert this entire thing into its own symbol. And maybe I'll turn it into a movie clip symbol. That way it plays by itself. Window properties, library. I'll just turn that into a movie clip symbol. Movie clip symbols are independent, so they don't really require a lot of frames in order to function. So what I'm going to do is this one here, I just basically created an animation let's see here that looks like this. Alright, nothing fancy, it's just to get an idea of you know, you can create an animation. This is an independent movie clip symbol, and that's what it does. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Puppet Producer, export selected symbols. We'll look for the folder where we want it. And also I could have gone to the library and select any item in the library. So in this case we're looking at this symbol here, and select the export function and choose the library item. Okay, so if it's a library item, we're selecting it from the library, export, and it's the same procedure. Sprites and save. I'm not going to do that now because I've already done it. And this is our sun symbol here. It's doing that little number. I'm going to drop it in there. And there it is. When we hit play, the animation kind of does its thing. So anytime you need a piece of artwork, you could just go to Flash, draw it, export it, and bring it into CrazyTalk. Or if you need to do a new type of animation that's not possible inside of CrazyTalk, you just use Flash as your art program. And animate it inside of CrazyTalk. All right, maybe we should put that sun in the back, behind the hills. So we got something that looks like that. Maybe now we want to animate our camera. So because we layered everything in 3D space, we have a little bit of a parallax feel to it. And let's take a look at it. Okay, well that pretty much takes care of the Puppet Producer interface workflow, the functions. You should now have a pretty good understanding about what it is that Puppet Producer does, how to configure a character. in the coming lessons, you will get a little bit more in depth on how to actually build characters. You'll get some ideas and pointers on what's the best way to go about creating characters, because there's more than one way to get these things done. So we're going to get a little bit heavier into the actual character creation process.